I'm not saddened by the recent passing of my grandfather. Rather, I'm compelled to share the way I knew him best. I would not be here today if it were not for him. The entity came for me when I was 8 years old, and there was no way I would have survived if anyone else had been driving. My grandfather and I were on a fishing trip that day. My dad had intended to join us, but something had come up, so it was just the two of us for the first time. I was a little awkward around my grandfather because I'd never actually been alone with him. I'd always watched others interact with him, but had little to say myself because I was only 8. I was also in awe of how he was to my dad and the way my dad was to me, namely, a voice of authority. When my grandfather told me about the different types of fish and what baits to use, I listened like it was the most important thing in the world. It turned out to be a good thing that I took his words so seriously. That acceptance would later save my life. As we walked through a small gorge to get back to the car from the prime fishing spot, I could hear my grandfather's voice echo from the high rock walls while he packed things into the car. I had several minutes to wander around, and I used them to run back to that area and shout. Strangely, my yell echoed only once, and then not at all. Scream as I might, I heard no reflection of the noise. I was too young at the time to really understand how impossible that was. I just assumed I was yelling wrong somehow, or that my grandfather had a special grown-up timbre that allowed his voice to echo while mine just dropped off. Still, it bothered me, and I eventually brought it up on the drive back. Everything about that moment became seared into my memory. It was 3:22 in the afternoon, by the clock in the car's dashboard. The sky was mostly clear with traces of white, and my grandfather's eyes were wide orbs of alarm turned up upon me, while his white knuckles tightened around the wheel. "What did you say, boy?" I asked how I can echo like you, I told him, suddenly afraid that I'd done something wrong. I yelled and I couldn't echo. His face was normally crisscrossed, with little lines that ran their way along relaxed droopy skin. At that moment, his forehead and cheeks tightened to smoothness, and he scanned left and right rapidly. He didn't seem to find what he was looking for through the windows, but he did not seem reassured. "Here." He leaned over and opened the glove box in front of me to pull out a bag of jelly beans. I smiled for a moment, but he was not giving them to me as a gift the way he intended. "Eat them all." I held the bag in my hands. It seemed a massive feast. If I had been left to my own devices, I might have eaten them all eventually, but not all at once. "Why?" "Eat them all, boy," he said gruffly, his tone brooking no argument. I began stuffing the jelly beans in my mouth. He looked down and around, and then back at the seat, then at his travel thermos in the cup holder between us. He thrust it into my hands to join the spilling bag of jelly beans. "Drink all of this. All of it." "I'm not allowed to drink coffee," I told him. "Mom," he cut me off. "Your mother will understand. Drink it. I know it tastes bad, but down it all." His gaze refocused on something beyond me, and I turned my head to the window to see the forested hills rolling by at various apparent speeds based on their distance. The furthest hills out on the horizon hardly seemed to be moving at all, but I thought I was a tiny little speck atop one. My grandfather gripped my shoulder with one hand. "Drink, boy, drink! And eat all of those jelly beans. You need the sugar and the caffeine. It's gonna try to make you fall asleep. Don't let it." To say I was scared would be an understatement. No part of me thought this was a prank of some sort. He was too reserved of a man for that. The coffee tasted horrible, but I gulped it down until none was left. After that, I began swallowing jelly beans whole until they were all gone. I looked to my right The speck in the distance was still out there, but now one range of hills closer. It was still tiny, but now held movement to something waving back and forth. I then looked to my grandfather. He in turn looked away from the thing in the distance to focus on my face. He breathed in through his nose and turned forward, determined in a way I'd never seen him. His legs moved and the car began to accelerate. We'd already been going the speed limit on the empty highway. The sugar, caffeine, and fear began to have an effect on me. I remember my cheeks and forehead warming and my hands growing clammy. I asked, "What's going on? I'm scared." "Be scared," he breathed, his eyes on the road as he continued to hit the gas. I could see the needle passing 80. "That'll help keep you awake. This thing, this godforsaken thing, it came for your grandmother, and it started the same way." Just before a long drive, we noticed her voice stopped echoing. His face contorted into a furious mask. "But cars are a lot better now than they were back then. I won't let it get to you too." My back began forcefully pressing into my seat as he put the gas to the floor. I watched the needle pass 90, and then I looked out the window again. It was even closer now visible as the silhouette of a man running up the hills, between trees, and over boulders parallel to us. "It's still out there." My grandfather grunted angrily and slammed his foot down. I held onto my armrest and the door handle, in terror as our car topped 100 miles an hour and began to shake. It felt like we were barely in control, far beyond any limit of safety, and I was terrified the highway would suddenly stop being empty and we would smash into a car or truck ahead. But even though that overwhelming fear and adrenaline, a chilled tiredness began seeping upon my spine. My eyes began to feel heavy, and I looked to my right. The shock woke me back up again. It was on the gravel shoulder of the highway now, completely visible as a black humanoid silhouette running at an incredible speed along our car. I could see lit pinpoints that made it feel as if I was gazing into the night itself. The afternoon sun burned in the sky above, and behind it with no effect. Staring as its blurred feet began to pelt across the painted line at the edge of the road, I felt sleepy again. It was running parallel to us, but drawing ever so closer. "Wake up!" my grandfather screamed, risking one hand off the wheel at 110 miles an hour to shake my shoulder. "It's trying to drain the life out of you. Wake up!" He jerked the car one lane to the left and still pressed into my seat by the acceleration. I stared down at the hypnotic dashes in the middle of the road. Bit by bit, black feet began landing between each dash, keeping pace with us. I remember the car shaking violently around me. I know we were crossing 120 and nearing the most the car could offer, but at that time, I was caught in watching the hypnotic dashes and stars in those void legs moving rapidly back and forth as it ran up alongside the car and reached down with one hand to open the door. Wind blasted around me as the gale force of 120 mile an hour winds tore at my clothing and hair. Waking up halfway, I screamed. My grandfather jerked the car to the left again, as much as he could without going off the road. It didn't matter. The running silhouette held the door open against the wind with its star-filled arm and began preparing to leap into the car with us. The other arm gripped my neck, and the cold that it brought cannot be described with mere words. The closest I can come to say is that the vast speeds and forces of an antithesis cosmos hated me. Somewhere, ice and anti-life were the rule, moving through emptiness at absurd velocities, and this thing was some small part of that undead will. But it was not fully here. It could only interact with us in certain windows. That's what I believe now. My grandfather gave the only shout of fear I would ever hear from him as the car seemed to be shaking apart around us. I looked left at the speedometer, found the needle to be unreadably far into the red, and felt the heavy blanket of sleep fall over me as the silhouette grasped repeatedly, but it failed to reach me. The door slammed shut, cutting off the wind. Inch by inch, we began pulling away. It ran furiously alongside, but the entity was just a tiny bit too slow. Between one moment and the next, realizing it couldn't get us, it completely vanished. We'd escaped it. I woke up in a hospital several days later. My grandfather told nobody the real story, of course, but the doctors had plenty of diversion. Somehow I'd been drained of a number of vital electrolytes, salts and so on, and they chalked my coma up to some sort of severe dietary imbalance. But I know the truth, and I've made sure to tell the people I care about the small piece of advice that my grandfather taught me. I really don't care if it makes sense to you. Just listen. It's out there still, in the open lands of the Midwest, and it's probably always been there. It was just never a problem before we started bringing great speeds into our daily lives. People die every day by falling asleep at the wheel, and I know for certain that not all of those incidents are innocent. If your voice stops echoing, cancel your road trip. It's waiting for you. Years ago, I lost my fiancée. I wish I had lost her to natural causes. At least then I would have known that she passed away peacefully. But no, I lost her in that goddamned hell house. I proposed to Julia, my girlfriend of 3 years, that October day, and when she said yes, she made me the happiest man alive. I suggested we drive to Austin for the weekend with some friends to celebrate, and she agreed. The plan was to drive to Austin after work on Thursday and arrive at our hotel sometime during the evening to be able to enjoy the rest of the weekend in full. That Thursday, my friend Josh and his girlfriend Hannah joined us, and we left sometime after 6 p.m. Most of the trip was pretty uneventful. We were met with heavy traffic on our way out of the city, which is not unusual for our city, just really inconvenient. The trip, which would usually take about 3 hours, would easily take 4.5 in this traffic, but like I said before, this wasn't unexpected. Aside from the traffic, I loved being on the road. Even though I had always lived in the city, there was something about rural backdrops that always captivated me. I know this isn't the greatest thing to admit, but even driving couldn't help but dart my eyes back and forth every once in a while to take in the farms and the cattle that thrive in those areas. These are the last remnants of the way life used to be here in Texas, and being on the road and seeing these sights made me a little nostalgic. The roaring peace we felt as the wind rushed through the windows was broken when Julia rolled up her window and said, "Look," pointing to a billboard up ahead. I tried to read the billboard as soon as I could. The billboard was a tacky looking thing for a haunted house that said, "Come experience all of our 13 floors, if you dare." I exited a few miles later and turned into an empty looking parking lot. I don't know, this looks pretty empty to me," I said. "This place probably doesn't get too many customers, due to it being out in the middle of nowhere, which means we have the whole place to ourselves," Julia said. I sighed. "Alright then, let's go check it out." I wasn't too thrilled about this, to be honest. I hated haunted houses. I was always all too aware that they were people pretending to be creatures or ghouls, but Julia loved this stuff, so I went along with it. The place certainly looked impressive, which was odd due to how little traffic I imagined them to get. The house seemed to be a huge-looking office complex, most likely built and then abandoned when the area failed to attract jobs, businesses, and people. We walked up to the front where a grandmother old lady greeted us. "Welcome. Is this your first time here?" she asked, to which we nodded. "Well, you're certainly in for a treat then," she said, and then went into what seemed like a well-rehearsed spiel about safety, no punching of the actors in the house, no running, etc. I rolled my eyes when she said that if we didn't follow the rules, we would become permanent residents of the Hell House. We paid our tickets and we were ushered in. To be honest, the 12 floors were pretty cool and altogether normal. There was a floor dedicated to the zombie outbreak, and we were being chased by moaning zombies, and around every corner or so, one of them would pop out at the most obvious corners and come crawling or simply snapping at us. There was also a clown floor, where we were supposed to be in some sort of circus, where the clowns had gone mad and killed everyone. Every room was a tableau of some sort of depicting said massacre of the circus's spectators, and the clowns would stand menacingly in some corner of the room, or they would jump out from some hidden nook or cranny. My favorite floor was the one depicting hell, and one of the rooms was covered in fog. As we navigated through the floor, demons would rise up from the fog and screech at us. My girlfriend was really into it. She would jump and scream and hug me tight whenever a scare came up, which made me think this wasn't all that bad after all, and so it went until we got to the 13th floor. Usually these types of houses advertise themselves as so scary that you won't make it through all the floors, and I imagine this was no different. But to be honest, I thought it had been pretty tame, if well put together up to this point. Everything changed on the 13th floor. When we got up to the 13th floor, we found ourselves in front of a number of doors. The grandmother woman from the front was blocking our way, and with a sinister smile, she said, "Congratulations on making it this far, but the worst is yet to come. Pick a door, any door. It may be the most important decision of your life." I rolled my eyes yet again, but my fiancé and friends were all up for it, so we made our way to 4 different floors and entered. I walked into a barren room with another door up ahead. The door shut heavily behind me, and I will admit that this made me jump. Then I heard a click as the door locked behind me, and mist started pouring into the room. I figured it was the fog to set the mood for the next room, but the fog kept rolling into the room until it suffocated the whole room. The fog became so thick in the room that eventually I had to breathe some of it in, and when I couldn't take it anymore, I started to cough. I heard the door ahead of me slowly swing open, and I made my way towards it. My vision started becoming blurry. My body began to feel heavy. I had never been under the influence, but I had this sinking suspicion that I had been drugged somehow. I trudged along to the next room, and what I saw felt straight out of a nightmare. On either side of the room were 2-way mirrors. Confused, I looked into them until lights illuminated what I was seeing. I saw my friend Josh walk into one of the adjacent rooms, where he was ambushed by a masked figure who swiftly hit him in the back of the head. My friend yelled with pain and slumped to the floor, and the figure lifted him as if he were nothing and strapped him onto a chair, ensuring he couldn't move. I could tell Josh was still dazed from the blow, but his eyes regained some clarity as soon as he saw Hannah crawl into the same room. "I see our other guests have arrived," said the masked figure. He immediately grabbed Hannah by the neck and tossed her into another chair in front of the one Josh was strapped into. "Okay, lover boy, you get to pick which one of you two gets to live," the masked figure said. "What the fuck is this? What are you doing?" Josh screamed, spittle flying everywhere. The masked figure put a finger in front of Josh's lips. All you have to do is choose. The figure then started circling Josh. Your little girlfriend has been drugged with a powerful hallucinogen, which means that she probably doesn't even know where she is at this moment, he said as he leaned in and spoke directly to his ear. If you pick her to die, she won't even know you killed her. And don't worry, it'll stay between the two of us, and you'll go scot-free. My friend screamed in frustration, rattling the chair as much as he could, but he soon said, "Alright, I give up. Just let me go." My eyes widened as the masked figure produced a long knife out of nowhere and began stabbing Hannah with impunity. Overkill would hardly describe what actually happened. That was the point where Josh began to cry. "I'm so sorry," he kept saying until the figure cut his bindings and said with a voice that seemed to glow, "You're free to go." I watched Josh pick himself up and quickly made his way to the door. Only when he opened it, he was met with gunfire from an unknown source to me. It was so loud that I had to cover my ears and close my eyes when I opened them again. I saw the body of my best friend, riddled with holes, and the masked man got to the task of moving the bodies. I then heard a tap behind me, so I turned to see Julia being brutally beaten by another masked figure. I pounded on the glass. I screamed at them to stop, but this seemed to only make matters worse. They beat her savagely to within an inch of her life, and then said, "Your boyfriend is watching this. He's probably enjoying it too." Hearing that, she began to drag herself to the mirror, and I met her there. She had a hand on the mirror, and I placed my hand there. I sobbed out of frustration that I could do nothing about the current situation. I had barely said, "I love you, Julia," when her body shook as a knife was plunged into her head. I screamed in agony, "You fucking sons of bitches, I'll kill you." But I did not get to finish spouting my toothless threats because I felt a sharp knock on the back of my head and I felt myself lose consciousness. When I woke up, I was back in my car. It had crashed into a telephone pole and the police were there. I was booked for driving under the influence and was told that I was really lucky to have made it out of the crash like that with only a bump on the back of my head. I told them about the haunted house and everything that transpired there, but they told me they didn't find anything on those roads. There was no house, they said. I must have made it up. I tried to move on. I really did, but I couldn't. No way was I going to let them get away with what they did. Today, after 5 years of fruitless searching, I finally found the godforsaken house, and I have enough gasoline to make sure this fucking place burns to the ground. Last year, my best friend Allie and I went on this great American road trip, trying to ski in as many states as possible in the month we had taken off from work. We did a lot of skiing, a lot of driving, and a lot of sleeping on various couches, truck stops, and of course, in motels. Most of the motels were fine. Some had great free breakfast. Some had dirty hot tubs that left us scrubbing ourselves in the shower and joking about getting pregnant from the water. Some had weird stains we tried not to think about. Some were spotless, but cold. A few were amazing, but only one was terrifying. We stopped at the motel around 10:30 after a long day of skiing, followed by a good 6 hours of driving. We were tired and sore and ready for bed. We had made some wrong turns and were not exactly sure where we were. We didn't want to use our data on our Canadian phones, so we were navigating old school with a map. It was mildly unsuccessful, but we were pretty sure we had a few more hours of driving until the next town, and we were not looking forward to it. So when we saw this glorious neon sign that blinked, motel and vacancy, we didn't need to say anything. We both knew that's where we were going to stay for the rest of the night. As we pulled up in the front of the office, I noticed that we were the only people staying there. I told myself that it wasn't creepy. We were stopping close to a summer tourist spot midwinter. Of course there would be an excess of rooms. In fact, we considered ourselves lucky that they were open at all. It was definitely not creepy. We entered the office, and a shrill little bell announced our entry to the world. We waited for someone to come to the front of the desk. Then we waited a bit longer. We shared looks with lifted eyebrows and tapped our fingers impatiently on the desk. "Hello?" Allie called out in silence. "Somebody here?" We waited a few more minutes. Then the door behind the counter slowly opened. An old man poked his head out, spotted us, and his face split into a wide grin. "Oh, some guests," he said. You know, I thought I heard something, but I told myself it was just my imagination. We don't get a lot of visitors around this time, and two beautiful young ladies too. I'm sorry to keep you waiting. I just couldn't believe that I had such luck. Welcome, welcome, welcome. He was certainly an odd duck, but I used to work long, lonely night shifts. I know how excited you get when something happens. So, travel-weary strangers, can I offer you a bed to rest your little heads? He smiled. Yeah, how much is a double room? He looked at us, grin not wavering. $99 for 2 beds, $79 for 1 bed. I was ready to splurge for the 2 beds. Allie moved a lot in her sleep and hogged the covers. Last night alone, she had kept waking me up. Let's do 2 beds. I looked at her pleadingly. She gave me a quick look filled with annoyance. I looked back at the man. His grin had faded. He looked as annoyed as Allie for a moment. When he noticed me looking at him, his grin snapped back into place. Actually, it seems we only have 1 bedrooms available. I'm so sorry. Wait, what? I couldn't help but burst out. There's like no other people here. Oh yes, that's the problem, isn't it? Sometimes we don't keep all the rooms prepped in the winter. Saves cost, you know? I considered that, but it didn't make sense at all. But to be honest, I was too tired to argue. You know what? For such pretty ladies, I will give you a discount. How about $69 for the 1 bedroom? We'll take it, Allie responded before I had time to think. Oh, thank you. We can pay by card, right? No, I'm afraid not. We never got around to that modern stuff. Gotta stay off the grid, right? Oh. He laughed at his own joke. I shuddered instantly. We had cash, so it was fine. He was creepy, but we were tired. We paid, got the keys, and drove up and parked in front of the room. I grabbed my stuff from the car, unlocked the door, and surveyed the room. It looked clean enough. The bed was big, and I was tired as hell. Hey, I'm gonna go for a little walk, actually. My legs are so stiff, Allie said from behind me. Wanna come? I eyed the bed. It looked too comfortable. Allie had a good point, but that bed was speaking to me. No, I'll just shower and crash. Okay, cool. I won't be very long. She turned and left. I slammed the door shut behind me and stripped out of my clothes as fast as I could. I jumped in the shower, and the luxurious feeling of hot water ran down my body. I had to force myself to get out. I went into the room, put on my PJs, and laid down on the bed. Allie wasn't back yet, but her nighttime strolls sometimes lasted as long as an hour, even when she was this tired. She had a hard time falling asleep, and those walks apparently helped. I got my phone out and tried connecting to the Wi-Fi. It didn't work. I immediately got annoyed, not because I really needed the Wi-Fi, but because I had paid for it and I wanted it. So I just laid there, getting annoyed and glaring back at the ceiling fan. It was a weird model, something black sticking out from the bottom. I had never seen that before. I wondered idly what it did. Then I thought about how we were the only people staying here, how Allie was walking somewhere alone in the dark, how I didn't know where she was, how creepy that guy had been when he laughed at his joke about staying off the grid. Then a familiar feeling of fear started creeping into my guts. I knew where my mind was going. I have an overactive imagination. I tend to turn every situation into a horror movie in my head. It's a real problem in my dating life. I think most guys are serial killers. Allie always makes fun of me for it. I thought about how the guy had offered us 2 beds and then refused to give it to us. Did he want us in this room specifically? Why? He probably had some creepy fantasy of 2 young girls sharing a bed. Ugh. I shook my head, trying to stop my mind from spinning out of control. I got off the bed and went over to the huge mirror on the wall. I got my hair out of the towel and started brushing it. I couldn't quite get rid of the uneasy feeling at the pit of my stomach. I knew I wouldn't sleep well that night. For some reason, I thought of the one-way mirror scene in Cabin in the Woods. God, why do I watch horror movies? They always come back to me at the worst times. So creepy. I vaguely recalled that there's a way to check if it's a real mirror. What was it again? You touch the mirror, and if there's no gap between your finger and the mirror finger, it's fake? I touched the mirror. There was no gap. I could see my eyes widening in fear in the mirror. No, wait, that can't be. I tried to reason with myself. That's just ridiculous. This is fine. We're fine. It's gotta be the other way around. I realized I could check the bathroom mirror. It was one of those medicine cabinet mirrors. That one was clearly real. I walked slowly into the bathroom. Please be the same, please be the same, please be the same, I muttered. I wiped the fogged mirror, took a breath, and slowly pressed my index finger against the surface. Ice filled my veins. A gap. I took a deep breath, trying to clear my mind. We needed to get out of here. Where was Allie? I felt panic bubbling. I needed to get out of here. Okay, but play it cool. They could be watching. Who the hell are they? I can't let them know that I know. I have to get out of here. I went back into the bedroom and started putting my stuff back in my little bag. I hoped it looked innocent enough. Maybe we wanted an early start, right? Maybe I had OCD and liked all my stuff in my bag. It was fine. I went to put the bag in the car. I turned the doorknob. Didn't move. I tried to stay calm, not to panic. They could be watching. Maybe it was just jammed. I tried the handle again. Nothing. I used all of my force. Again, nothing. So I got my phone out. Figured I'd text Allie, call the police or something. No signal. I wanted to cry. I looked around the room for a window. For the very first time, I noticed that they had bars in front of them. I've seen that before, of course. It's a safety precaution. My ground floor apartment in the city also had them, so that people can't break in. I had never before considered that they also effectively stop people from breaking out. I figured the door must unlock from the outside only. Once you're in the room, you're stuck there. I pinned all of my hopes on that idea. Allie would come back, unlock the door, and we would get out of here. The next 10 minutes were the longest of my life. I kept trying to come up with a plan, with something, but my mind was drowned in adrenaline. Finally, I heard footsteps outside. Allie was back. I got up, standing right next to the door. She put the key in the lock, turned it, and it opened. "Allie, get in the car right now," I said as I pushed her out of the room. "What? Why?" "Fucking camera in the room," I hissed as I pushed her back. Her eyes went wide, and she immediately obliged. I unlocked the car, threw my bag in the back, and we both jumped in. The door to the adjacent room burst open, and the old man came running out. He slammed his hands on the hood, as if to try to hold us back with his bare hands. We both screamed as I skidded out of there. Even in my panic, I could see several shapes behind him in the room. He had not been alone. I just kept driving, praying that they weren't following us. "Oh my God, we have to call the police," Allie said after an hour of driving. I nodded. She used her precious data to find the number of the local sheriff's office and called them up. I only heard half the conversation. Hey, I want to report an almost a crime. I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure what it was." No, sir, it's not a joke. We were staying at this motel, and there was a camera and a one-way mirror, and the door didn't unlock from the inside," she said, looking at me for confirmation. I nodded. "And there were people in the room behind that mirror too." Her eyes went wide in fear as she repeated the information. Then she described the location of the motel. "Yes. No." She sounded uncertain. "We've been skiing." She frowned. "Yeah? No, that's fine. We'd rather not." I looked at her. "No, really. We're already out of state. We just wanted to let you know." She abruptly hung up. "What was that?" I don't know. He wanted us to come back and give a statement." "Shouldn't we?" She didn't say anything for a little while. I don't know. I got a really bad vibe. Let's not, okay? Please?" "And small-town American sheriff's office? That's like how you totally die in horror movies. We're not in a horror movie, though. Aren't we?" I shrugged. I wasn't really stoked on the idea of going back either. Frankly, I was still worried that they were following us. I really didn't want to get pushed off the road by some psycho hillbilly motel manager, and we had told the police, and we did do our part, or so I thought. Yesterday, there was a story in the news about 3 young girls gone missing. They were road tripping in that area. They never made it back to Seattle. I can't help but wonder what would have happened if Allie didn't take that walk. What if we both got locked in that room? What the people in the other room expected? What were they gonna do? Or if Allie and I could have been that missing person's story. Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. So first off, I just want to give a huge shout out to all of you who have been supporting this channel and helping it grow. So thank you guys for always being amazing and making my day a tad bit better. I also would like to give a shout out to Mortis Media, Lady McCreepsta, and Stories, Fables, and Ghostly Tales for being the amazing people you are. You've all inspired me to grow and to find ways to be better, and I truly appreciate everything you've done for this channel. So with that out of the way, I planned on doing a 1K special, and was going to be putting out a story daily for the next 7 days. However, due to how much time goes into these stories, with the limited amount of time that I have, I really don't think I'd accomplish that. So instead, I want you guys to decide the next episode. We'll have a vote on what I should do next, and I'll drop that video sometime next week. I'll leave a vote in the comments below. Oh, and by the way, if you haven't already, go and check out Mortis Media. Lady McCreepsta and I jumped on a narration for his channel, but warning, it may make you itch. Well, that's my spiel, ladies and gentlemen. Again, a huge thank you to everyone who subscribed and are constantly showing your support. You're all absolutely phenomenal, and the reason why I even continue doing this. So stay amazing. And last but not least, always remember, I am the words that keep the birds humming. Join me.